Welcome everyone. Today we have with us Pratap Vardhan sir. Pratap Vardhan sir did his graduation from NIT Bhopal, is currently working as a data scientist at Khan Academy, and is the founder of Stats of India. Welcome to the podcast, sir.
Hey, thanks, Jay. Happy to be here.
Thanks for coming on the podcast, sir.
Okay, so just small correction. If possible, try avoiding calling me sir. You can just call me Pratap.
Sure. Uh, my first question to you is, sir, how did you end up at NIT Bhopal? I think NIT is like the second tier to IIT, so you must have prepared for IIT. What was that experience like?
Right. So I think this was probably like almost 10 years back, right? So let me recap what would probably happen. So I did give JE, and so I think during my growing up, I'm not necessarily good at academics, right? So I used to probably flunk or just pass most of my subjects, but I developed some deep interest in math and physics because they seem more logical. I don't have to buy hard subjects or write things. So I think naturally that gave me inclination towards doing engineering, and most likely I was more interested in the mechanical aspects of robotics and some kind of human computer interaction. So I think then the JE thing started, but so I couldn't clear the top ranks, which would get me a good seat. So I was probably in the part of the waiting list or the extended list back then, which we had.
Yeah.
And somehow managed to get some rank in AIEEE. And back then we had state quotas and everything differently. So from the state that I come from, we had relatively less seats for the ECE branch that I wanted to pick. And for some weird reasons, I was not very particular. I was very particular of only doing ECE and not doing CSE, right? In hindsight, it probably doesn't make much of a difference of what I'm doing today. So I think in the counseling, what I did was I basically looked up what are the top ranking colleges which were eligible for AIEEE, just selected all the colleges which had ECE branch and were eligible for the state that I'm from. And then I went in with whatever came my way. So that's how I started. And so from then, I think and by that time, I think I didn't have any exposure to programming, nor did I have a personal laptop or a computer till my second year, right? And we didn't have it at home, right? And I think gradually, like once it slowly went on, almost I think towards the end of my engineering, I realized that what I'm probably doing outside of my actual work or actual engineering degree is probably more keen in a mix of both computer science and engineering. It is more in the blend of doing more on signal processing and image processing and all of that. But yeah, I in particular, I think I was not very keen in terms of like which stream to pick back then. It was just naturally, for some weird reason, I just chose that let me not just do computer science, because I thought if you're just doing computer science, you might end up becoming an IT engineer. I was more keen on doing something on mechanical aspects, but I didn't want to also pick mechanical engineering because I wanted to do some amount of programming as well.
Some amount of both, hence the electrical engineering.
But I think back then I didn't have too many people to talk to or understand what's the reality of things. And that must have just have skewed with my perception of what to pick back then.
Fantastic. AIII means that at that time you had only one exam, right? Currently there are two exams, JEE Mains and Advanced.
I think so.
Yeah. Correct. How was that 2 years? How did you prepare for the? Was your aim at getting into top IITs and then you repented getting into NIT, or you just felt like at least I get into some great college?
Not necessarily. So I think back then my opinion of colleges was most necessarily like you crack a competitive exam, you're probably good at cracking that exam. Not necessarily you're smarter than most people, right? Like I know people who are probably smarter than me, but they're not necessarily good at cracking quant in the time period or whatever that may be. So, but I knew back then probably the top college could be IIT Bombay or IIT Madras, right? And then apart from out of that, I think I was okay with any college that came through, because if it's not able to get, and I also probably had a feeling that if I didn't think I would anyway get top 200 rank in IIT any which way, the very unlikely I would get CSE or EC there. So I was not really expecting or disappointed of that such. But yeah, I think getting any college was fine for me. I said we'll figure out things. So it wasn't too much of a struggle there.
Then how was your coding life started at NIT? Like, did you, like you told, right, you bought the computer or laptop at second year of college. Since then it started?
Yeah, so I think like in most engineering colleges, I think programming was, at least back then, I don't think it's probably significantly changed now. So it was not necessarily thought in a way that you need to love programming for like what potential it has, right? So I really didn't know about it back then. But I think in second to third year, when like a couple of my friends, we started doing a bunch of robotics projects, like building autonomous robots, which are probably mazes and things like that, using sensors and all. And you realize that you basically can write to microcontrollers and you need to learn certain amount of programming, or you would have certain GUI tools which will allow you to do that. But I think in the process of doing those projects, you probably learned a couple of languages, but I wouldn't call them like necessarily programming languages. Those are necessarily like tools which you use to build things. And that's how I began. So I learned programming over a period of time, more like being a hacker. Like I want to build something, and then I figure out what is the best tool or what is the best language to do this, and try to use that language and learn the basic parts that are necessary to language. So I think for most part of the things that I have usually built, it might be in one language. I might not have been necessarily a proficient programmer in that language. For example, probably like 10 years ago, I might have built something in R, but I wouldn't have necessarily learned all the basics of it. Right? But I just only learned the necessary things that are required to build things. And then from there on, like use internet or probably change certain values, then see what's happening and things like that. That's how I mostly learn most of the programming language afterwards.
No, that's the same thing, right? Most people, I think people go the approach of, let's say I want to learn C++, right? And then they will learn C++. Like, but I learned programming the same way as you said, right? I wanted to build show, then realized that this is the Python language that I need for it, and then learned only the things that I needed, like for loops, the conditions, OPS, or object-oriented programming, all that was only needed for my use case, right?
Yes. I think for different people, it works differently. Some people would like to first understand the foundational subjects and then move on. And for me, I would probably do it opposite if I were doing something in physics. Right? So I probably would not jump into a subject directly learning the peripheral subject. I would like to learn foundations of physics and then move on. But I think when it comes to programming, I do the opposite approach, which is what is the bare minimum I need to build something, and then figure out, okay, how do I optimize this code? Like, or let's say, for example, for a long period, I didn't know what are the implications of event listeners in JavaScript do, or how does memory gets garbled in browsers, right? For a very long time, because I didn't need to learn, or I didn't come across issues where I need to learn. But when issues started propping up, that's when I started to learn, which is fine. I mean, either way you learn whichever is the best way that you think is the way for you to learn either programming languages or other things.
Fantastic. Then in the last 2 years of your engineering, you also worked at Indian Statistical Institute, right? So what was that experience about?
So I think around third year, fourth year, I think probably at the end of the second year, I was keen on doing PhD, like
research.
Yeah, I wanted to go into research primarily because back then I was before the data was as big as today. I think back then I was more fascinated with image processing, computer vision, signal processing, and all of that.
Yeah.
And so for my winter and summer internships, I had applied for a few colleges, like few universities which were doing theoretical research and then practical applications. So I was fortunate enough to intern at with few professors, and then first one was with a professor at Indian Statistical Institute, and there the work was primarily around. So we had data around the brain signals, right, that you collect, and can we predict before a seizure happens, before a person starts getting into a seizure, and then what kind of ways in which, and then what is the prediction accuracy if you can do the onset of the seizure 15 minutes earlier or 30 minutes earlier and so on. So that was the first project. And then I think that was the first time I got exposed to like, how do you publish a paper like in a journal, and what's the peer review process, and how do you communicate with editors and all of that, which I've never done before. And then there I met another prof who was into signal processing. And that was also the first time I probably got exposed to structured data. All this while I was mostly doing like geospatial data sets or signal processing data sets and so on.
Yeah.
So back then, I don't remember the exact year, it could be 2009, 10 or 11, around that period, CBSE was doing some kind of marks normalization. They've changed the format of AAAE or something, and they were trying to give certain weightage to your board marks. They're trying to collect. So people in certain, like for example, someone scoring X marks in Tamil Nadu may not be same in Kerala or Maharashtra, right? Because they have different boards, different scoring systems. They're trying to come up with a normalization formula.
Yeah, standardization.
Yeah. So I was part of the same lab and I was looking through it. So it had like millions of rows of students' data and all of that. So I was very fascinated just to look at the data, like what potentially you can do. But for me, the primary interest was like, I mean, you have so much data and there could be hundreds of insights that you can come through it. For example, if your first name is like this, what kind of marks do you score? Or there's a distribution of birth data. So it's, I think, from that particular data set. And then when I was working with another person, we also found that people tend to, particularly not in all places, especially in rural India, you tend to get your birth certificate registration done pretty late, not very early.
Right? Yeah.
So what happens is people, when they usually round up your birthdays, they do like rounded up numbers, like either even numbers or around 5th, 10th or 15th.
Got it. Right?
Or last month of the week or something like that. So when you actually take the data and plot it on a calendar of the year and then see how many people were born in each of the days, you will actually see a star pattern like 5th, 10th, 15th will actually become dark.
Yeah.
And you do the same plot now for people who are born on that particular date. What is their average marks? Right? You'll actually see that people who were born on the 5th, supposedly 5th, they're right? 5th, 10th, or some of those dates, the average score is actually slightly lower. So one of the probabilities is that people, that's one thing. And then the other thing is also that if you're probably born September and afterwards, and someone who's born before June and July, right? One person will probably join first class, other person will probably join second class. So there's just few months difference. I think some parents get excited and they want their child to get started soon, not miss a year. So they fudge the date of birth slightly little earlier. You'll actually see those months also, those particular months where you actually have higher births, which look little like adjusted. Marks scored by them also are lower. So I think they have done some research and explained that if you force children before they actually gain the maturity to do that grade, they tend to score lesser because either they miss classes, right? You could be missing the classes, or psychologically you feel you're out of place, right? Because you look your class for people are much elder than you. Yeah. So I think that was like one of the first exposures to the data, which really excited me. Like, there are a lot of things, unhidden things that can come out of data, and you can start explaining things to people. And some of them could be just like fun explorations, right? They don't need to necessarily have real consequences. Yeah. But yeah, I think that became part of my hobby. Like, apart from the other hobbies that I have, like exploring data has been like one of the hobbies that I come back to often. Like if there are days when I get bored with my work or any other older jobs when I probably didn't like working on them. So data and programming are like one of those things where I come back to relax, to explore. So I think right from the ISI days, I started getting exposed to these things, and that gradually built a very strong interest in it. That was the first start of data journey, right, with you? Yeah. Because the data visual, like you said, right, you can extract key insights and then plot it in form of the data visualization aspects that you do at Stats of India, where user can understand things in a better way. Second thing that also probably like very prominently happened back then was, so there's a TED talk by Hans Rosling, right? And he great talks on how to communicate with data and then kind of changes that are happening in the world. So I think so one of the first time, I think that may also probably be the first TED talk that I ever saw, right? And the way he explained, like you attended it personally, physically. I was just watching YouTube. Yeah. But the video is so phenomenal. I mean, I even if I watch it like a couple of times, 2-3 years later, I still get the same goosebumps whenever I watch the video. So it's one of those first videos that gave me the impression that, it's not just about uncovering insights, but how do you communicate? Like, it's one thing like 10 people knowing a fact, but if a million people can know that fact, then they can actually make the world a better place, right? So a lot of work that Hans Rosling did was more about like, how do you tell positive stories of the change that has happened in the world over a period of time, and what ways can you actually communicate with data? How do you correct a lot of human biases that we hold? Each of us, like even you or me, we would be exposed to certain kind of news or a Twitter feed or certain kind of information, and then we will have some mental stereotypes in our head, like, okay, if someone is from this place or this age group or this gender or so on, so we might stereotype them in a certain way. So I think, so part of the reasons for Stats of India is also like to explain more visually, reach more people that probably who get bored with probably even seeing the similar kind of data or stories.
Yeah, tabular format, right?
In the mainstream media, right? So I think part of the reasons to start Stats of India was also that whatever I've been learning or exploring, how do I let other 100 people also see the same information? So yeah, so that's been one of the things.
When did you at which year did you start Stats of India, sir?
It hasn't been even a year yet, actually.
Oh, fantastic.
So, but yeah, before Stats of India, I was doing a couple of other projects, but
Yeah.
it's not very specific to India. So I was doing more like, there was a portal called Inamtor where I was doing everything to do with data, but not necessarily about India stories. Over a period of time, in some ways, I've tried to narrow down, like trying to only understand India more better, because in India itself, you have a lot of diversity, like a lot of culture. You have so many states, so many languages, so many religions. So I mean, there's a lot of stories that can be told. Like, I don't think I'll tell all the stories in my lifetime, even if I want to. But I think it thought I'll just try to focus and narrow down my area just to create stuff more around India and then see how it happens. So I think Stats of India just became like, it originally started as an outlet where I'll just put my stuff, right? I'll just catalog and put that stuff. But like for random reasons, it just got some traction. And then now we're just figuring out things like what else can you do to make it more visible for others? What are the interesting things that you can use to communicate more stories about India, and experiment with different formats or different data sets, and also figure out ways in which more people can also tell similar stories.
Fantastic. What tech stack do you use behind Stats of India, sir?
So I think if you're talking about the website, it's a static website.
Yeah. Like the visualization aspect of it.
Right. So it's a mix of things. So usually the data processing, I usually do it in Python. And visualization, unless it's very interactive. So if it's an interactive visualization, then I do it in JavaScript. I use DPJs. And if it's heavy on large data processing, and if I need to have more control over the analog pixel, then I try to do it in Python itself. Like, for example, I think there's a visual on the temperature data. Like in the summer of April 2022, how many people were probably exposed to 40 degrees and above. So there you have to crunch like gigabytes of data from satellite imagery, and then try to layer in different layers of data on top of it. So there again, I do mostly in Python. There may be certain 3D visualizations I do in R, but like heavily it's either Python or JavaScript.
Fantastic. And what work do you do as a data scientist at Khan Academy, sir?
Yeah, so I think in Khan Academy is a recent stint. Like I joined them last year, and the work here focuses heavily on trying to understand what our students are learning, right? And then also like what kind of behavior teachers are doing, to try and answer a few questions so that the teachers can provide better medium of instruction for the students. So when they're learning, like for example, the student, when they come onto the platform, they may be navigating to different aspects of the website. Maybe they're stuck, right? So you try to identify what portion of the users are actually struggling to even navigate the website. Then maybe that calls in for a training for the teachers to use the platform better. Also, to give a brief backdrop, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the platform itself.
Yeah.
So one is the platform is free for everyone to use, right? Yeah. So you can go ahead and use. But there's also other side of things that we do in India is that we work with a lot of state governments where the media for instruction in a lot of government school is still in local language. So it's not in English.
Yeah.
So what we do is we actually translate a lot of languages, a lot of content into local languages, and then train the teachers to actually use the platform better. Now, in the process, then you need to learn like how many teachers are actually using the platform effectively. If they're not using, where are they struggling? Identify those areas from the platform data. Then now once assuming that the students are effectively learning the platform, which areas are they struggling? So I think one of the emphasis, even the recent change in our the way the education is supposed to be done. So I think one of the changes that we're probably seeing is that we want to focus more on the outcomes, skills. Right?
Yeah.
So you'll start measuring like, is a sixth grade student able to do exercises or answer questions on divisions, right?
Yeah.
Or struggling, or which schools are actually struggling than the state's average. So try to identify those areas and then try to give visibility to state administrators or to our partners, and then so that they can intervene and do some revisions rather than waiting till end of the year or probably to next year and then realize a sixth class student might have graduated to seventh, but they're still struggling with fifth class concepts.
Got it.
So yeah, data helps in capturing those insights much quicker. And then we try to streamline a lot of engineering effort to get those insights as quickly as possible to the team so that they can act on it.
Fantastic. Fantastic. All my questions are done, sir. Do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, I mean, do you want to explain, like, tell your story of like what made you start show, or like curious to know, like at this age, like what, do you have any background in investments or investing stock markets, right? Like from your family, or like where did it all begin?
No, like no one in my family invests in stock markets, but I got interested in stock markets, right? And in 2021, briefly, right, I started investing, and then realized that there are many pain points that I myself face as an investor that needs to be solved, and hence create a show for myself only, and then the later became a website.
Okay, interesting. And you're saying so none of your father or mother invests actually?
No, but when I started, my dad also started investing with me. We both started together.
Okay. And so what was your that first, why did you like, what interested you? What was that first, I don't know, news item or a talk or a video? What made you get fascinated in this field?
I think compounding, right? The curve of simple interest is like this, right? This, and like the compound interest is like this over the years. So in the compound interest formula, the T matters, right? Not the rate of return that you get. So the time matters. So if you start early, the compounding you will get in the last 5 to 6 years is like every year it will 10x, 20x, 30x from the previous one. That pretty fascinated me.
Okay. Cool.
Fantastic. Thanks for coming on the podcast, sir.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Jay. Good luck with show.
Thank you.